Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription.
What are some common misconceptions employees have about career planning, and how can human resource professionals address these effectively?
Well, I think an organizational standpoint, and these are adults who have experience in at work, is that they don't have to career plan. I mean, that career planning happens early in their career, and it's not something that they continuously do. We've seen, I think, since COVID, when COVID and the pandemic has really kind of amplified the struggles that people had in maintaining their job, and then transitions that happen. Like there were a lot of people who were able to transition to online work, and there were others who were forced to go into work. And of course, there were a lot of people started to pivot, and people who really know themselves and know the skills that they bring and have were able to do that pretty successfully. And those who didn't really understand their strengths could not. Self-assessment and understanding is really, really important. Because if you don't understand your strengths or the skills that you've gained through the various experiences in the various jobs that you've had, you're not going to be able to pivot easily.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of HR Next, Unpacking Trends and Talent Innovations, our monthly dive into the evolving world of human resources. My name is Bill Rothwell, and I'll be your host today. If you're not familiar with me, I'm a distinguished professor at Penn State University in workforce education and development. And what makes me unusual as a professor is that I had nearly 20 years of full-time work experience in HR before I came to Penn State. And since then, I have started and operated 6 small businesses. And I'm excited to introduce you to our guest this month, Dr. Cecilia Maldonado from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I'll let her introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rothwell, for inviting me to be interviewed today. I'm excited to talk about career development and HR. I have been at UNLV for 24 years and have also played numerous roles in higher education. I'm a tenured faculty member, and most recently, I served as Associate Vice Provost for Workforce Development, in charge of establishing career development initiatives at UNLV with various stakeholders across campus to support students' career development and growth.
Okay, well, I have a list of questions. Let me just jump right into the first question. What motivated your focus on workforce development and career planning, and how have you seen these areas change over time?
I earned my PhD at Penn State with you, and my background was training and development back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I came to UNLV preparing training and development professionals. Really love the aspect of preparing people for work and things that we can do to better motivate people, and organizations providing the structure to support people at work. and all of that is not training and development, it's organization development as well. But I really love the aspect of helping people thrive and find happiness at work. I have seen a lot of changes, especially in the previous role. I did a lot of research around what trends are happening and what kinds of things we should be doing with our students. What I found was the trends, technology is really impacting the trends and so quickly that I think people can't keep up with the trends. But I'm really fascinated by how people prepare for work.
So, how do you feel your background has influenced your approach to career development and planning?
Well, I've always taken on jobs where I help people, and I think that that's always been my prominent role, even in the service activities that I became engaged in at UNLV is really about supporting people at work, and so it's a passion that I have, and so I'm just automatically attracted or driven to support those kinds of initiatives on campus.
What are key strategies for helping individuals understand and start their career planning early? And why is this an important practice throughout your career?
Okay, so strategies in helping individuals start their career planning early. I think there's a lot of initiatives in the K-12 school system, and I don't believe that career planning is something that is emphasized enough in the school system. So students come out, and I'm talking from a college perspective. I think students come out having an idea of what they want to do, but really have no experience in that realm of work that they want to do, nor do they understand the steps and actions they need to do to prepare for those careers. And or they understand all of the resources available to help you understand what it takes to be successful in a career. So students come out knowing they want to come to college, but then they struggle navigating the college area. They also don't really understand that career planning is something they should engage in early and often. And so some of the new initiatives are multiple internships. And when do college students usually focus on internships? It's usually the last year. And how many times have you heard as a professor, and I've experienced it as well, is students get into their internships and decide they hate what they're doing. And now they're trying to figure out where do they go from there because they only have, less than a year to finish college. And so that is a very disheartening place to be. And so, and given the trends again and the extreme changes going on in workplace, in the workplace today, students have to be prepared early and often with strategies that are overtly taught, not assume that they get from the interactions in college. I think that premise is really the foundation for a lot of the work that we started to do at UNLV in my previous role. I think people don't really understand that. And so you have to teach them and tell them why it's important.
What are some common misconceptions employees have about career planning, and how can human resource professionals address these effectively?
Well, I think an organizational standpoint, and these are adults who have experience in at work, is that they don't have to career plan. I mean, that career planning happens early in their career, and it's not something that they continuously do. We've seen, I think, since COVID, when COVID and the pandemic has really kind of amplified the struggles that people had in maintaining their job and then transitions that happen. Like there were a lot of people who were able to transition to online work, and there were others who were forced to go into work. And of course, there were a lot of people started to pivot, and people who really know themselves and know the skills that they bring and have were able to do that pretty successfully. And those who didn't really understand their strengths could not. Self assessment and understanding is really, really important. Because if you don't understand your strengths or the skills that you've gained through the various experiences in the various jobs that you've had, you're not going to be able to pivot easily. One of the trends that's happening now is that employers are dropping the bachelor credential and focusing on strengths and skill sets. The degree doesn't necessarily dictate where you're going to be, right? So I think the field is much broader when you talk about skill sets and what you bring and the support and how you support a particular organization in an industry that you may not have any experience in. And so I think it's hard for people to kind of wrap their minds around that. And so continuous research in terms of industries that are hiring. There are a ton of government sites. The Department of Labor provides lots of rich information about where the jobs are, where it's hiring. Manufacturing is a big thing right now. But manufacturing they don't only look for people working on the manufacturing floors. They need HR professionals, they need talent development professionals, they need CPAs, they need, there's a whole host of people that work for those particular industries that may not necessarily that people may not necessarily consider them as a potential industry to work in. I think employers, on the other hand, also struggle, right? Because they come to college campuses hiring particular majors and they also ignore the variety that are available for people, and you kind of miss if you're narrowly focusing on just a small group of people within a major, you're going to miss a whole group of people who might be really great to work in your industry. So self-assessment, understanding the trends and the industries. And so we don't necessarily also teach people how to self-assess their skills. And so I think that HR professionals could really support people in helping them assess their own skills and then provide them suggestions for where they might be able to gain those skills. Or if an organization is really on top of sort of the trends, right? And the trends being that there's a fight for talent and that labor participation is at its lowest it's been in a long time, I think at about 60%. We've got a huge number of baby boomers retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. That's going to leave a huge gap. We've got new generations coming in that don't necessarily have the skills they have the skills to get the first initial job, but they don't have the skills to move up the ladder. And they don't have leadership skills that will help these organizations remain robust. And so HR professionals are really important in trying to set up those systems so that employees who are looking to move up the ladder or move laterally into other positions have the resources and the information they need to be able to smoothly pivot and move into that. And so the more self-awareness you have, the better you are at trying to understand what industries utilize the skills that you bring. Really important. And then networking. We don't teach people how to network and build connections. Everyone's working from home. We're teaching online most of the time. And so the one-on-one communication and the emotional IQ of people coming into work is lacking. And so LinkedIn Learning could be used as a connection. So someone whose job you really would like to know more about, you connect with them via LinkedIn and figure out how you can learn more about that. That's something that we're trying to teach students. And I think adults who are dissatisfied or looking for other opportunities also can use that strategy. Another misconception, I think, would be that there are limited opportunities for people who've been in the workplace for a long time. And that may not necessarily be the case. Again, if you look at skill-based hiring and what's happening right now, I think once you understand yourself and the skills that you bring, I think that opens up a lot of opportunities, not just in industries that you're familiar with, but in other industries you might be able to. And training is always important. I think people can be trained. And you can sell your skills, I think, into organizations that you may not have previous experience in. And all experience matters. You should capture that in your CV and be able to talk about that. And understand that if you are moving from one industry to another that you may not have a lot of experience in, know that you have to, there's a time that you have to kind of get familiar with that, and that you may not feel instant fulfillment, but that there are opportunities to grow, and you can show how you contribute to that particular industry. Another strategy that I didn't mention before is always seek mentorship and guidance. So people who can review your CV or your resume, who can provide you honest feedback, um, and getting feedback also for your performance in your current job, or the competencies and skills that you have, like honest assessments about where you are and where you might be able to improve. People sometimes have a hard time hearing those things and don't want to admit. I think we all, when we self-assess, we always self-assess higher than what we really are. And so that presents an issue, right? Then you wonder why you're not getting opportunities. Always stay informed and up and understand market trends. You know, the whole thing right now is about AI, and people in tech might be worried that they can't get a job because there were significant layoffs maybe 6 months ago in the tech field. And now a lot of organizations are looking for AI. But if you understand the premise of AI, and you take you take advantage of the opportunities for these short-term courses, either at universities or online through Coursera, online platforms, you can also develop those skills. So there are opportunities to learn consistently. You just have to know what you like, what you don't like, and where those opportunities lie. And then always have a growth mindset and lifelong learning attitude, because learning never stops. And so I think young folks think that once they finish college or they get a degree or certificate or diploma, that they don't have to do anything anymore. And that is probably the worst thing you can think of. That learning is always awesome, and you have to show your initiative and your growth as you move forward in your career. And that also can help you in the pivot. So I hope I was able to answer that.
That's great.
That was a long answer.
That's fine. So let me move on to the next question. What are some of the core aspects of career planning that every HR professional should understand?
Well, assessment
Yeah.
and providing, and I would hope, and I know all organizations don't do this, but I think there have to be certain structures in place to really support people in the organizations. And what do I mean by that? If you're going to do career planning for people, right? I know organizations that have done career planning for people that are being moved out. Right? Once an organization is downsized. And so people might see that as a negative thing, because they associate it with, like, oh my God, they're asking me to do some career planning. Maybe they're going to get rid of my job. I hope that's not the case. But organizations that have sort of retain our best talent, and we want to make sure our people are happy and they understand that there are opportunities here, those HR professionals should be able to put these things in place, right? So you want to make sure that you have good assessment tools and a safe place that people can self-assess and grow from those opportunities, and that people don't feel that if they're missing something, they're going to be let go, or for some reason, right? There has to be confidentiality in the process as well. Also, if HR professionals can put career ladders in place, and I don't know if that's an antiquated term, I'm not sure, but just pathways for people to move up, either laterally or vertically, those folks do much better in organizations, because everyone, and that's one of the retention tools, is that people want to know that they can grow and do more than the job that they have. And if there are no growth opportunities, more than likely retention is probably an issue for that particular organization. So that structure has to be in place and has to be communicated with current employees, right? So that people know how to take advantage of that. There should be goal setting, and HR professionals should know the jobs that are available. And if they are working with one person and they understand those strengths, that HR professional can serve as a career coach, right? It's like, hey,
Right.
I think your strengths could fit well here or here. And here's how I'm going to connect you to someone who's doing that job. And maybe we can create some kind of mentoring opportunity for you. And then here are some classes or some short-term courses. They're calling micro-learning courses now that people can do in 15 minutes at their desk to help you build those skills in those particular areas. And then you have to understand what you're learning and figure out how to integrate that new learning into your current performance and your behavior, right? Because training is all about changing behavior. And if you don't hold people accountable for that, it's a waste, right?
Right.
And then HR also should be responsible for offering skill development and competency building opportunities. I think we had a discussion in our group about the model. I forgot the name of the person who does the 70 20 10 Lominger's, yes.
70-20-10 rule, yes.
Thank you. And so the 70% of the opportunity should be on the job training, cross training opportunities, actual experience that people can say, hey, I think I could do this, because that builds confidence.
Yes.
Yes. 20% they're saying should be, I think, formal.
No, it's 10% is formal, 20% is social interaction with peers.
Yes.
Or through social learning. Social learning is a fancy term for monkey see, monkey do learning, where we watch someone who is good at something and then we try to imitate them and learn from what they did, how they did it. We try to imitate that in order to get good at or better at something we aspire to do. Like running meetings. If you don't know how to run a meeting and you think your boss is good at that, then you carefully watch how your boss runs a meeting. You might even take notes about how the boss does it. And then you practice it. You try to imitate what you saw him or her do. And then you might get feedback from other people. And that's a very powerful way to learn, is you're trying it out, but you're basing it on a real world example of someone you thought was good at it.
And I think that particular model, thank you for clearing that up, is really powerful for, especially for this new generation in the workplace, because a lot of them don't have seen those models, and a lot of them don't really know how to navigate the workplaces because we haven't had enough personal contact to really observe others. And so a lot of organizations, when they offer their skill development and competency building opportunities, is usually in classes. And we don't necessarily retain a lot of what comes out of that classes unless there's some bridge that help them translate, okay, this is what I learned and this is how I apply it to my job. And then this is how I'm going to be measured, evaluated in my performance. So if the organization is not going to be accountable for that, people are going to walk out and forget what they learned, and it will never be translated into them. So this 70-20-10 model, I think, is an amazing approach to skill development and competency building, but the structure has to be in place and the support systems have to be in place.
Well, and you have to realize managers as a group don't know how to manage the 70, and they don't even know how to coach on the 20.
Right.
So some of that leadership has to come from HR, and woefully a lot of HR people are clueless on how to do that.
Right. So, I mean, those are sort of the important changes that really will make a difference, I think, in people's lives. If the organization cares, right? That's the other thing. If you really care about retaining your people and supporting your people, you will offer those things. And then finally, I think the ability to career explore and to understand role discovery. And so sometimes you may not know that you have a strength in a particular area, you have a passion for it until you actually go and do it. And so what opportunities can the organization provide to support that kind of learning experience in the organization?
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
Some organizations have formal shadowing experiences where you apply to shadow someone whose job or whose department you want to work in, and then you can see what they really do. Of course, you have to put some controls on that because everybody wants to shadow the CEO, and we can't permit, the janitor following the CEO around in hopes that he or she can get that job someday. So we have to organize it. But those are highly effective. And that's just one example.
Right. And then the other trend happening right now, I think that HR professionals are being asked to do is to look at work-life balance and well-being. And work-life balance may not necessarily be the current term, but well-being is important. So looking at mindfulness, looking at balance in the workplace and providing support through their EAB structures or through, again, skill development opportunities is to really focus on, because mental health, I think the pandemic brought that out, that mental health issues are really impinging or impacting organizations today.
Before the pandemic, many companies jumped on the bandwagon of physical fitness. So they installed fitness facilities, and that's still important because we have an obesity epidemic in the US, but the pandemic brought to the fore the whole issue of mental health. And we do have a suicide epidemic in the United States and globally. And many of those focus on young men, not exclusively. Women try suicide more often, but men are more likely to succeed in committing suicide. And so there is a need for organizations to deal with the underlying cause, which is a feeling of isolation.
Right.
And that was a big problem during the pandemic where everybody was stuck at home, interacting only through virtual methods. So that caused many problems. And then we, of course, have spiritual needs. And a lot of organizations don't quite know what to do with that need. And some turn to religion, but religion is only one way to express spirituality, and that's also an issue. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. And HR does have a role to play with that.
Yes.
So, how do you feel HR can support employees in starting and maintaining their active career planning process? There's two sides to this. There's what the company should do, or meaning the employer, and there's what the individual should do. So we usually talk about what the company should do as career management. And we talk about what the workers should do, and we call that career planning.
Mm-hmm.
And the two of those need to, be integrated. So what are your thoughts about what HR should do?
Well, I mean, I think the organizational structure should support whatever program is available for employees, right? Otherwise, people are going to become dissatisfied or resentful that these things are in place, but there really are no opportunities. There's favoritism that they play in the workplace. And so I do think that the management of a program also has to align with their philosophy and then the opportunities they present their employees. So if such a structure exists, and not just as an outgoing benefit, right, when you're downsized, is again, offer opportunities to assess and for people to kind of go through and figure out what their strengths are and ways that they can build those strengths, offer personalized development plans that are measured effectively, because performance and feedback is also one of those systems that aren't really often designed very well. And a good performance and feedback system gives people honest, effective feedback about their performance, and not in a nasty criticizing way, but a way that helps them build their confidence and gives them the initiative to go and gain some skills or master some skills that they may have and may need to get to the next level. I think create a mentorship program that, and mentorship is one of those hard things. I ran that when I was working in the faculty affairs office at UNLV. It's really difficult because all the research that supports mentorship saying that mentorship is an organic process, and usually
Right.
people who see themselves in the other naturally connect, and so that leaves out a lot of people, right? Usually women and people of color are not necessarily supported in mentorships when it's left to the organic approach. But creating a program that connects people together requires training, requires mentors to be trained about the expectations, what their, the guardrails that they should operate under when they're mentoring someone, because sometimes mentees come in and they share something that's not necessarily appropriate, or, the mentors, what are the expectations the organization asks them to do. And mentees have a role as well. And oftentimes, when you are partnered with someone who might have a high level position as a mentee, you may not want to bother them, right? And so then that connection never really happens. And so mentees have responsibilities in that mentorship relationship, as does the mentor. And the organization has to provide the structures and the training so that it thrives, as well as the time for people to connect, right? Either do lunch together, or observations, like you said. There's lots of things, and so the organization has to support that time off. Those bosses have to support time away from desk to show that they really do support growth in that organization. So HR should really think carefully about what that program is like. Again, provide sometimes employees don't pay attention to the things that are offered, or the resources that are offered within an organization. And so having those written out by an HR professional might help them be consistent about what kind of training they're engaged in, and ways that supports their goals. Encourage cross-functional experiences. Again, that's another hard one, right? You grow, especially if you're going to adopt the 70-20-10 rule. You have to create opportunities for those cross-functional experiences for people. And also those folks who are going to participate have to know, again, the guardrails or the box that they're going to play in, right? What's the area that they're responsible for doing, and what is inappropriate when you're hosting someone in your particular area. You want to support regular career conversations. And so one of the things that I did, because there were not a lot of people who volunteered to mentor, was to do group mentoring. And so that I put together like a panel of experienced faculty on a particular topic. Maybe it's grant writing, or maybe it's publishing articles. And I would put together a panel and invite people to do sort of a group mentoring opportunity, not necessarily listening to them, but they would come and talk about their background, and then people could go and meet with them one-on-one to talk about that. And so that worked really that was really effective, and not a lot of pressure on the mentors who were supporting young faculty. And faculty also didn't feel like that they were bothering or infringing on that person's time. So group mentoring is really, peer development is also important. So HR people should know people with strengths within the organization. Invite someone to come and talk about their area. Maybe it's just an awareness, like come and understand people who work in this particular area. And then they have maybe like a 20-minute, bring your lunch opportunity to listen. And then that allows employees to understand exactly what roles might be available. Definitely build pathways that are clear, right? Not nebulous, that people kind of have to try to figure out, how do I get from here to here? Those should be clear. The expectations of the competencies should be clear. Again, not very easy to do in a really complex organization, but those ladders or those opportunities should be pretty clear. How do you reward people, right? Again, the reward systems and recognition systems are important, especially for people who volunteer to serve as mentors or to serve as peer guides, or who sponsor someone to come to their area to learn the role. What reward systems are in place for them? You just can't assume, because those are additional responsibilities on top of the work that they already have to do. And so you have to support that. Integrate those kinds of things in any programs that they provide.
Okay, shall we move on? What strategies can HR use to encourage employees to take charge of their own career growth? A lot of people think the boss is in charge of their career. How do we get them to take responsibility?
That's a great question. I think employers could start the conversations, and then within the conversations really encourage people to do it on their own and to remain vigilant and continuous. And I think it helps when people understand the trends and I happen to believe that having a workforce development framework from which to do career development really supports the why it's important to remain current and active in your career planning, just because technology presents changes all the time. And right now the discussions around automation proofing your jobs, they talked about a lot of jobs are going to be replaced with robots. But the important pieces is that the human qualities, the kindness, the empathy, the being able to connect with people, those are still skills that are highly valued. And those, what we call those soft skills, and they matter more than even the technical skills, because if you have the opportunities to do, you have great customer service skills, you can be empathetic, you communicate well, you work well with other people, you have really strong emotional intelligence. Those are the things that get you to the next level, because it's connection with people that really drive that. And so if people understand how important that is, I think, and they see people who are being elevated because of that, I think that sends a strong message. But I think people have to be told that. I don't think they assume that or they know that automatically by working. I think people don't really understand the connection between those soft skills or the trends and what they need and their role in that. So I think people have to be taught that.
We've been hearing complaints at Penn State from employers, and we hear it through the engineering college, we hear it through the business school, where students will come out and they've got fabulous technical skills. They are wizards on the keyboard and with computers or with cell phones or tablets. But when it comes to interpersonal relations and face-to-face interaction, they are terrible.
Yeah.
And at least that's what many employers are complaining about. And that's prompted the university to explore ways to build social skills among students. And it's kind of difficult because research indicates the average young person today spends 8 hours a day in front of some kind of screen. Their cell phone screen, their computer screen, their tablet screen, some kind of screen, instead of interacting with other human beings.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
Right, and they don't have the etiquette, right? What do you do at a business meeting that's at a restaurant? And they've never had that experience. I think we assume, I think my generation and I think we're the same generation, Dr. Rothwell, we're baby boomers. I think we just assume we get that from our families, and that's not necessarily the case. And so those skills have to be taught. I know I was part of a group about a year ago who were really interested in bringing the social emotional skills into the K-12. So even from a national perspective, those social emotional skills are being taught in K-12 schools. That's how important it is.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to teach people those things and let them know why it's important to get it. Not only what they have to know, but why it's important and how it really determines careers. So, and that also provides some hope for not being automated out of your job, right? So you have great skills. Hopefully the organization will find something for you because you have those skills. You have to be able to promote it. One of the initiatives we're doing at UNLV is helping professors help students articulate those skills in their syllabus. So how 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 much do students really hate team projects, right? They want that, especially those that are really driven. They want control of their grade and they don't want other people to be involved or to really impact their work and their grade. However, teamwork is really important in the workplace. If you can't get along with other people, you can't lead other people, you're not going to be able to move anywhere, I think, within an organization. And then there's the leadership qualities, right? How do you communicate and how do you hold people accountable for their part in it? And so it's really hard for that person who might be leading that project to let go because they're so focused on their grade. And so it is challenged. But those kind of behaviors translate into the workplace. And if you
Yes,
can't
they
figure
do.
that out if you can't figure it out in the classroom, you're not going to figure it out in the workplace. And the impact of or the outcome of that might be much more severe than just getting a few points out of a project in the
Yeah,
classroom.
you might get fired because you're unable to work on a team.
Yes. So those social emotional aspects of and those people skills are so important. And so I think HR people are it's important. I think it's really important that they highlight those things in whatever opportunities they have.
And it's something to look for during interviews. When we interview people, that's an opportunity to assess social skills.
Right.
And the higher you go in the organization, usually there are multiple interviews. If you want to be CEO, you'll probably go through, 6 rounds of interviews at least.
Right.
You meet a lot of people and they can assess what your social skills are in that process as well as your technical skills.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
moving on. So in the context of career planning, what trends are you seeing and how should professionals prepare to meet those changing demands?
Well, we had a brief, I mean, in the last question, I think I talked about those, right? The need for amplified human skills and those soft skills. How
That's a trend, yes.
a huge trend. Also, employers are dropping the entry level credential of the bachelor's degree because there's such a fight for talent. And so I think I talked about it before 62.3% of labor participation. It's the lowest it's been in a while. We don't necessarily have an increase in college degrees or people who've earned college degrees. And
And
so,
it's heavily weighted to the female gender too. What is it? 60% of
yeah,
college students today are female, only 40% are male.
yes, yes. And also competency building and skill building within the organization because people come in with such limited skills. Like that part of it is really, organizations are struggling with that. And back in the 90s, they stopped doing a lot of training because it was expensive and people were leaving. And so, in addition to understanding the need for those programs, now you have to build in what are ways that you're going to retain people? How do you
Yeah.
appreciate people? What benefits are we going to offer people to entice them to come work for us? And so with the, social media and with the internet, people, I think kids are pretty wise about what an organization has to offer. And so I'm reading that organizations are being really creative in terms of the benefits that they offer people. So I've read, and I don't know any organization has done this, giving you some benefit for childcare, right? To
Oh,
support
yeah.
childcare. Some of them are talking about providing some form of monetary incentive for down payment on a house.
Yeah.
They're looking at more than educational benefits, but they're just looking at creative ways to entice employees to come and work. And I think young people are aware of that and they're utilizing that, right, to kind of get what they need at a job. And so it's sort of an employees, well, I think pandemic did that too, right? Which is sort of an employees are kind of dictating what they want. I think it's starting to come back the other way where employers now, especially with the layoff of all those tech people, right? Because a lot of people left their jobs, they created their own jobs. The gig economy was huge. People are moving abroad and they're promoting that lifestyle. And these kids want that. They want flexibility. And so if you don't have flexibility, good luck trying to find people, and if you're in an industry where you have to be there, what are ways that you can incentivize people to come and work for you, right? I served as a panel member last year, and there was a CEO of a company that is looking, it's a manufacturing company. And she says, we can't get anyone to come and work. They just don't want to work. And we're providing all kind of incentives. Our salaries are really competitive, but we can't find people who want to work. And so
Yeah.
what do you do? What does a company do in that? Who knows with the political landscape what's going to happen too. I don't want
I'm
to
an
talk about politics, but that's going
I'm an
to
employer myself, and I can tell you that if you have a job opening, you can put an ad on a job board and it could sit there for a year and you get no response. So there are several factors at play there. People judge it based on their assumptions about the nature of the job. For example, if you put an ad in a job on a job board for entry level factory work, it's going to be really hard getting anyone to apply because people think that's a dirty, tough, physically demanding job that doesn't pay what it's the difficulties involved in working with it. So I agree with you completely that it's really difficult. And then I recently tried to hire a manager for a motel I own, and what I found was that every applicant were people who had had 10 jobs in the last 5 years. And they looked good on paper until you started going through how long they had worked in different positions. And they all jumped around like grasshoppers. I mean, there was no, and then when I asked, why did you jump so frequently? I got fake answers, things that didn't make sense.
well, that's a trend I think with the young folks right now is they're like we were taught that you don't jump around, right? It looks
Yeah.
really bad on your resume. But young people think opposite. They think that you go into the job. I mean, they're not going to be loyal. I think our generation is probably the last loyal group of workers that you probably wouldn't want to hire. Young people now are saying they're using jobs to gain the skills they need, and there's no loyalty whatsoever. And they start jumping to build the skill sets that they want to get to in order to get to a particular place. So that is a trend, and I don't think young people really see anything negative with that. I don't know. Actually, I haven't kept up with that trend, so I'm not really sure where we are in terms of whether that's okay or that's acceptable or not acceptable anymore. But I know,
Well, employers don't think it is acceptable, but workers think it's okay.
yeah, yeah. And so those are like little nuances that people don't really understand and know. and they don't get that information from, home anymore for the most part.
So last week we interviewed one of your colleagues, Dr. Mears. She emphasized the need for balance. What is your perspective on balance and career planning for the future?
Well, I think balance is probably one of the more important aspects of careers especially for this new generation coming into the workplace. If, if, look, we have a very narrow bench for leadership these days in higher ed. Like the bench for leadership, like people who want to be presidents is like, when this older generation goes, good luck trying to find presidents, just because it's become so political. People are getting fired for different things, and it's very public kinds of, look at what happened this summer with Dr. Gay in at Harvard, and very political, and people don't want that. Like these young folks don't want all the hassle. They want balance. And if they can't find a job with balance, they're not even going to, they want money, and they want a salary, and they want balance. And so they're not necessarily willing to, I'm not going to generalize there, but I'm just saying that's a struggle to try to get people to that place. And so I think balance is probably one of the most important things that we're doing. And I think the framework that my colleagues and I are working on really looks at career planning from multiple perspectives, right? Looking at financial wellness and other well-being and how career development does it. I think the days of planning in a small box and not looking at your entire life are going away. I think just people don't know how to do it. And so, we're looking forward to promoting the framework that we've come with. Like, it's more holistic approach to planning your career life. I think we have to do more of that, right? And incorporate all of those aspects of a person that are important to them. And I think balance, again, is the focus of what that is. So I think we have to do better with that.
And we have to consider, what do we mean by balance? There's many different ways to think about that. When we hear work-life balance, it sounds like there's only two components we need to worry about balancing, and I think that's a false assumption. Okay, well, I want to thank you for participating today in this interview. Do you have any final words of wisdom to offer our listeners or viewers?
Yeah, just don't be overwhelmed. Change happens. It seems like it's rapid change, but there are a lot of resources available for you to prepare yourself and to gain the skills that you want. I think universities are also looking at implementing and offering a lot of short-term certificates. They understand that people don't have the time to earn a degree, but they're looking at short-term certificates as a way of developing skill sets, and that may eventually lead to some degree. So, pay attention to that. That's a trend that's also helping or supporting the need for upskilling and reskilling. So don't feel like you're the only person out there. There are a lot of people in your seats, right? In your shoes. And there are a lot of support systems out there right now, because people do need good talent. If you can prepare yourself, there should be opportunity for you.
The one advice I would have is, we need to teach young people and even those employed to take more responsibility for managing their own career.
Right.
That's tough, because students today don't hear that in grade school, in high school, in college, even in graduate school. So somewhere the message needs to be sent increasingly about the importance of career planning. So thank you again for participating in the interview today.
Thank you very much.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now